The National Bureau of Statistics has just released the unemployment and underemployment data for the second quarter 2020. The report comes 2 years after the last one was released in 2018. The report shows the unemployment rate in the second quarter 2020 was 27.1%, up from the 23.1% recorded in the third quarter of 2018. The underemployment rate increased from 20.1% in the third quarter 2018 to 28.6% in the second quarter of 2020. Now, for the period under review, the unemployment rate among young people, that's 15 to 34 years, was 34.9%, up from 29.7%, while the rate of underemployment for the same age group rose to 28.2% from 25.7% in the third quarter 2018. These rates were the highest when compared to other age groupings. And the number of persons in the economically active or working age population, that's between 15 to 64 years of age during the reference period of the survey, the second quarter 2020, was 116.87 million. The number of persons in the labor force, that is people within age 15 to 64 who are able and willing to work, was estimated to be 80.29 million. This was 11.3% less than the number of persons in the third quarter 2018. Of this number, those within the age bracket of 25 to 34 were highest, while 23.32 million, or about 29.1% of the labor force. Now, the total number of people in employment, that is people with jobs during the reference period among rural dwellers, rose to 31.5% from 22.8%, while the rate among urban dwellers rose to 23.2% from 58.5 million. Of this number, 35.58 million were full-time employed, that is worked 40 plus hours per week, while 22.94 were underemployed, that is working between 20 to 29 hours per week. Now, let's look at states now. Imo State reported the highest rate of unemployment with 48.7%, followed by Akwa Ibom State and Rivers State with 45.2% and 43.7% respectively. Now, the state with the lowest rate was Anambra State in the southeast with 13.1%. Our total number of 2.73 million did not do any work in the last 7 days preceding the survey due to the lockdown, but had secured jobs to return to after the lockdown. For underemployment, the state which recorded the highest rate was Zamfara with 43.7%, while Anambra State recorded the lowest underemployment rate. Okay, joining me now to speak to this latest data is the Chief Executive Officer of CFG Advisory, Mr. Tilewa Adebajo. Good morning, Mr. Adebajo. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Chimeze. How are you this morning?
Very well, thank you. Well, 27.1%, that's the rate of unemployment rate for the second quarter of 2020. And of course, unemployment rate among young people rose to 34.9%. Is this in line with your expectations considering the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Not exactly. I think we haven't really factored in the COVID effect into this data. But I think what is important that we have to do before we start this analysis, Chimeze, is that we need to qualify this information because you will realize from the data you've just analyzed that the results from fourth quarter 2019 to first quarter 2020 is missing. So we have a significant portion of the data which is not available. And as you rightly said before we started this, you started in your excellent analysis for the beginning of this program. The last time this exercise was carried out was what, 2 years ago? Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of gaps that we see in this. And in terms of looking at this information, I think it's important that we qualify this and we say this very quickly. So what we have to do right now, we need to extrapolate this information to begin to realize its impact. Yes, we're saying with what I get from this is that a population of 180 million people, only 58 million people are working. And out of the 58 million people that are working, as you mentioned, the underemployment rate, 22 million of this 58 million is unemployed, underemployed. Now, so when you take a look at this and you drill down further, they're saying that the economically active people are at about 100 million. So what you're saying is that the informal sector, or people that are economically active, but they're not capturing their full impact, is probably about 40 million people. Yes, as you've seen and as you rightly mentioned, 27% unemployment. And of course, if you take a look at drill down to the youth segment, which is most critical, where the biggest numbers are, 35% of our youth are unemployed. And it's not an accident that you're seeing the issues among the youth, where you're looking at rising crime level, cybercrime activities. You're taking a look at drugs, increase in drug use. You're taking a look at the social problems in terms of rape, assault, and significant amount of drug use on the increase in the country. This 35%, the effect of that is what you're seeing. But yes, these numbers are real. But I think that if you take a look at the COVID effect on these numbers will be significantly more than what we're seeing.
All right, let's look at the time frame it took for them to come up with this data. Why do you think it took this long to, release another unemployment rate?
Well, that is the significant question you need to ask, because statistical sampling is something that you do regularly. They're able to come out with basic economic data, GDP numbers, and so there is a structure in place. So I really cannot answer that question. But I think when we have this discussion, I think we will have to probably pose that question to the people at the National Bureau of Statistics, who, by the way, are doing an excellent job with giving us very good, accurate, and reliable information. But that is why I said we need to qualify this report to let you know that this is the first time we're seeing this in 2 years, and the fact that the fourth quarter 2019 to first quarter 2020 is absent. So we need to see the impact of that.
Now, while unemployment rates seem to be going up, the price of oil is coming down. There is an inverse relationship, obviously. What does that tell us?
Well, the key factors now is that you need to now take a look at the impact of this indices, because this is a key economic indicator of economic activity and especially well-being. Unfortunately, for most central banks in the world now, unemployment is also a number that they've been asked to manage, to measure, and to try to see how they can make an impact. But it's not something that is on the radar in Nigeria. It is not something that we like to talk about. We always talk about job creation. We're going to create 20 million jobs. We're going to create 40 million jobs. You have all these social empowerment programs. You have all these job creation programs that you all hear about. But at the end of the day, what tends to happen is that you have a situation whereby the issues around this are quite difficult in terms of what needs to be done and how all these things need to be sorted out. So these are the difficulties that you face when it comes to a lot of all these issues.
All right, talking about, of course, some of the job creation measures that the federal government seem to be coming up with, the latest being the Youth Bank, about 75 billion naira investment fund. Is that enough, really, to curb the level of unemployment rate we have in Nigeria?
Well, you're right. There are a lot of initiatives in government and power to be able to address this issue of unemployment. But I think we need to sit back now and begin to ask ourselves a question. How effective is all this information? How effective is this data? And these are the things that we need to look at and to see how we can support effectively. And these are the challenges that we have going forward. So I think it is important right now that the government take a look at all their programs and review that and to begin to make an impact. You see, this issue of the economy growing at 1.2% or 2%, it becomes very critical. So the whole argument about GDP growth in the economy you can now begin to see the impact. If your economy is only growing at 2% and your population is growing at 3.5%, this is the sort of impact that you see, and this is the sort of challenges and the problems that you have going forward.
Is there a correlation between Nigeria's unemployment rate and the population growth?
Definitely. If you take a look at, if you take your population is growing at 3.5% per annum. So if you focus on your population growing at 3.5% per annum, you know how many graduates are coming out of school every year. So if you're not growing your economy fast enough, obviously you're going to go into a deficit. So if your economic growth cannot match the rate of your population growth, then clearly it's going to impact the productivity of your citizens. And that is why we are focusing on economic growth. If your economy was growing at 6% per annum, then you can absorb this and you have productive capacity for employment in your economy. And the key with employment is that there's also consumer spending. This is only one of the economies whereby consumer spending does not provide the stimulus in the economy, because you have 100 million Nigerians at the poverty level. As you've seen, only 58 million Nigerians are actively engaged. So where is the spending power? Where is the purchasing power? It doesn't exist. And these are the challenges whereby government needs to address, that growth of the economy is significant because the consequences just goes beyond those numbers. The key problem you have is that as your population grows, you're no longer able to provide for them. And you see that 35% number within the youth segment, which makes up about close to 70% of our population. And that is why you have all these social challenges that we all need to address. So it's time for a significant review, and we should stop paying lip service to these employment programs, and we need to have metrics to measure the impact they have on the economy, because they are critical to productivity and consumer spending. If Nigerians are engaged and they have money, then they have consumer spending, they have purchasing power. They can create stimulus for economic growth. But if they're not, then you have a challenge.
Now, let's look at the states that have the highest unemployment rate. Imo State, Akwa Ibom, Rivers State, mostly oil-producing state. I mean, what do you think about this?
Look, Chimeze, when I saw this data this morning, that was the most shocking to me. Akwa Ibom, 45% unemployment rate. River State, 43%. Delta, 30%. Lagos State, for instance, has maybe unemployment of 20%. Kebbi State, low at about 16%. And Anambra State, only 13%. It's so shocking that the oil-producing states that have probably the highest resource control allocations, some very high levels of internally generated revenues, are the ones that have the highest level of unemployment. That correlation for me is totally mind-boggling. And, we really need to drill down to understand what causes these distortions, but there's significant inefficiencies in those areas. If I was the governors of any of these states, I would want to question this data and understand what the significance is, because to be honest with you, I cannot explain it. Kebbi State's unemployment is 16%, and Rivers State, which is oil producing, is 43%, and Akwa Ibom, which is oil producing, is 45%. And Anambra State, which is just next door to them, is only 13%. Kebbi State, 16%. So there's a problem, and we need to really look at that. But to be honest with you, I don't have an answer to that question right now.
Yeah, so talking about those states with lowest unemployment rate, of course, mostly in the north, we have Sokoto, Zamfara, Kwara. What does that suggest?
Well, those states are typically agrarian economies. So you find a situation whereby, apart from the fact that they're agrarian, there's also seasonal fluctuations. Most people go to the farm at planting seasons, and they're also there at harvest. So because they have a strong agrarian base, they're able to keep their unemployment levels very low. And that itself, but also they say, states like there's a distortion. You can't generalize. You have to take a look at those key states we're talking about. Kebbi, and a few others. But there are other states there, like Kano and Kaduna, that also have unemployment rates that are close to the national average and are more. So you can't really generalize, but because you have a strong agrarian base, the rates of unemployment tends to be lower and more seasonal. During the harvest time and during the planting season, a lot more people are engaged in agriculture, and there are a lot of seasonal fluctuations in the north. So depending on the time you capture it, then you can understand better what happens.
Now, do you think migration has anything to do with this?
Oh, definitely. I mean, you know that even in the urban centers like Lagos, most of the northern workers who are here, you always find the fact that during harvest and during planting season, they're always taking off their breaks to go home and help with that activity. And then they come back to Lagos and they begin to take their jobs here.
Now, when we look at the unemployment rate, we look at the underemployment rate. Of course, the inflation number hopefully will be released on Monday. And then according to economic think tanks at the FDC, they are estimating the misery index at 68.26%. What do you have to say about that?
Well, for me, these are the sign of the times, if you see where I'm coming from. Our economy is going through a recession. We don't know how deep the recession is going to be. The contraction of the economy can be anywhere between 5 to 10%, depending on how the government manages this contraction. So these are definitely challenging times. And so those sort of index will be on the rise. And again, I think my concern is the fact that we have seen an economic plan that has been announced, but unfortunately, we haven't seen any follow-up with the implementation of those plans. We're seeing stalling. The World Bank loans, we've not been able to, and World Bank loans, we've not been able to meet the conditions that the World Bank has set for us. We've not been able to restructure our economy, the structural reforms that we need to make, single window foreign exchange. We need to take a look at our electricity tariffs, removal of subsidies. These sort of distortions in our economy, we've not removed them. You know that the last quarter, we spent 95% of our revenues just on debt service. So a lot of all these structural issues are non-sustainable. And if we don't address these issues, it becomes quite difficult for us to see any clear direction on economic growth and to be able to address the fundamental issues. Because to any economy, the fundamental issue you discuss is unemployment. That is really the core and the basis of any economy, because at the end of the day, it is a political economy and it's about the people. And you need to get people engaged and you need to get people empowered, and people have to have economic activity to be able to earn a decent living and contribute meaningfully to the country's development.
Now, do you think this is a data the Monetary Policy Committee should probably, consider in its next decision-making meeting?
Yes, it is important. Like I said earlier, all central banks in the world, most central banks in the world, unemployment numbers are a significant KPI for them, a key performance indicator. They need to understand unemployment and they need to put in policies that can drive employment on that. And the key driver to unemployment is growth. So if our economy was growing at 6.5% per annum, we will not have 100 million people in poverty. So if you grow your economy to the optimal levels, then you wouldn't have a problem. So as far as I am concerned, and from my own experience, the key driver to any economy is growth. If you can sustain your growth, then it's 6.5%. We've done 8.5% growth in Nigeria before. When Nigeria's economy was growing at 8.5%, inflation rate was 11%. At that point in time, unemployment rates were significantly low. We didn't have 100 million people in poverty. We had an emerging middle class. Banks were beginning to give out consumer loans. You could get a loan to buy a car, to buy electronic equipment. You could get mortgages. These are the sort of drivers that we need to be able to, things we need to do to be able to challenge our economy. So these are the things that you need to talk about, and we begin to see exactly how things are going. Growth is significant. Growth is really the key. If our economy is growing at 2% and our population is growing at 3.5%, we're going to constantly see these results. It's as simple and basic as that. So if we don't get it, growth is the key, period.
All right, we'll continue to talk about this, and hopefully things might probably get better. Thank you very much, Mr. Adebajo, for your time.
Thank you very much, and have a lovely weekend.
Thank you. Same to you. Otilewa Adebajo is the Chief Executive Officer, CFG Advisory. We take a break, and when we come back, we still talk about the Kama law, but this time as it relates to the capital market. Do stay with us.